Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? We are going to be well into fall by the time you hear this. Are you having your pumpkin spice lattes? Do you have them? Do you like them? I don't really care for them, but I do like fall. So how are you doing and what's going on with you? Today's episode, I think you'll really enjoy. I know they say that every time. What if I just said, I think today's episode stinks? Jen and I talk about what do you do when unexpected things happen? And we talk about, I share something that happened today that it was a cluster duck right before we were going to record. And today I was able to manage it really well, but I talk about all these little things that happened that were unexpected. But I also talk about had this happened last week when I was really dysregulated, it would have caused a meltdown. And Jen and I had this beautiful discussion about how we can use where we're at in the moment. And the goal is not to be in the place that I was today. It always feels nice, but the goal is to be able to be okay with wherever you're at. Jen talks about humility in a way that I didn't understand, so I asked her to explain it to me. I have a different way of conceptualizing. For me, I call it being in the messy middle. This is one of the things that I love about having these discussions with Jen because we see things differently. I think overall our theories are the same and we have the same beliefs, but how we conceptualize our treatment is often different. And so you really get the benefit of seeing two different ways and you get to see which one resonates more with you. But Jen talks about dosha of Ayurveda and the goal is to go out of balance. And Jen talks about forgetting that she's a verb and not a noun. So when things get hard to get in that stuck place as opposed to this is just hard right now, and this is not permanent. And we talk about what does it take, what Jen calls to have that transparency in the moment. When things are hard, how do we talk to ourselves? It's not always perfect. And the goal is to not do it perfectly and smoothly. It's to be as compassionate as we can when we're struggling and things get thrown at us and to recognize the larger context of, am I handling this well because I've got lots of resources, or is this a hard time? And this is just one more thing that makes it harder. I don't know. I just think you're going to like this episode. And if you don't, that's okay too. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. I'm hanging in there. Life is full and crazy as always. I feel like I always say that. How are you?
I'm actually good. We'll talk about what's going on, but just a lot of unexpected kind of crazy shirt show stuff. And I think this is part of what is important to talk about. I think because I'm feeling rested, I've been eating well, I've been getting my needs met, it didn't throw me. But I think had this happened like last week when I was really dysregulated, I think this would have just, I'd be angry or in tears or, and another thing, and this, And like, we just kind of took care of stuff, but it was kind of a lot to come home to.
Was it like the death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of?
Well, it's funny. We ordered this fridge. We bought another fridge, I don't know, a little over 5 years ago. We never buy a 5-year warranty. And my husband's like, don't buy warranties. I bought a 5-year warranty. This fridge broke down over and over and over and over. And then after the warranty expired, it continued to break down. And we've been having problems. And there's ice buildup in the freezer. And then we get puddles of water. When the water melts, we have freezer burn. I mean, it's just been a nightmare. So we decided to be proactive and get a new fridge before this one conked on us. And we ordered it back in June. So we're recording today is July 25th. We ordered this in June. It was maybe 3 weeks out. It was supposed to be here June 8th. Then Lowe's, do not buy appliances from Lowe's. We've had a really lousy experience. If you've had a great one, then go for it. According to my experience, I wouldn't recommend it. They said, we'll call you the night before to schedule for Friday the 8th. Great. Thursday comes around, no call. We try and call them. You can't get through. We spent so much time on the phone. We finally get through. They're like, there's a note here. Didn't anybody call you that it's going to be delivered next Friday? Like, what do people do if they have schedules and lives and jobs? So, okay, great. Next Friday. The following Friday, Steve was going to be out of town. And I said, no way is that going to be delivered on my watch. I'm not doing this alone. And so he figured when they'd call, he'd just tell them to reschedule. So next Thursday night comes around the 14th of July. We call and he can't get through. We don't hear anything. Friday morning, he calls. I get on the phone. I call. I finally get in touch with someone and they say, oh, the fridge was just shipped from wherever they're shipping it from on July 11th. And we don't know when it's going to be there. And I tell the guy, I'm kind of frustrated that no one's communicating with me. This man had the audacity to say, I'm communicating with you right now.
Oh my goodness.
And who called whom? I did not handle it very well, and I'm okay with that. And then we didn't hear anything. So Saturday, Steve actually drove to Lowe's to talk to them to find out what was going on. They had no information. They just knew that it was shipped. Again, we'll call you the night before to schedule in a 4-hour window. So this morning I go to paddle and I get to where I'm launching from and Steve texts me and says, the fridge will be delivered between now and noon today. Really?
Oh, wow.
So he was fine handling on his own. So I came home. I can't park where I normally park to take my boat off the car because this delivery truck is parked in the middle of the street. My boat's still on my car. I come in. The guys can't get the fridge into the doorway where the kitchen is. Everything that was in the fridge and freezer is on the counter. Steve had to take everything out. And I walk in and nobody has a mask on. I'm like, you guys are vaccinated, right? And the guy goes, no. Okay, grab your masks, everybody. I didn't say anything to them. Just Steve and I grabbed our masks and put them on. And we were told that we'd just be able to put the food into the fridge. And these guys say it'll take 6 hours, so you can't put your food in the fridge. And this was about 11:30, and you and I were scheduled to record at noon. So normally I get home, I take the boat off the car, I hang up all my wet stuff, I put everything away, take a shower, I clean up. So you and I are trying to decide if we can record or not. Steve's made 2 trips to 7-Eleven to get bags of ice. Fortunately, my mom lives behind us, and she had some room in her fridge and freezer. And apparently the valve on we have water from the fridge that comes out. The valve needs to be replaced. So there's a plumbing truck parked in front of our house, and they're working next door. So I went next door and said, are you guys able to replace a valve when you're done? He said, sure. I said, please come on over. While all of this is happening, someone's supposed to come and look at, the neighbor that I've told you about that's not delightful. They have this huge ficus tree and the roots are on our side of the house. I'm sure they're already under the house, but we've had to have the roots cut back because ficus trees, you know how they are. They spread out. The roots are above ground. We've asked them to get it cut back. They're not responding to us. Big surprise, huh? We don't have to deal with the guy, but we deal with his mom. But she's like, yeah, no problem. Just reach out to me. And she's not responding. So that guy was supposed to be here at the same time that all this chaos is going on with the fridge. But fortunately, he was late. And he got here right before we started to record. So my dog was barking like crazy. So we may have a little bit more barking. But sometimes this stuff happens. But what I want to really stress to people is our reaction depends on how we're doing. I had a great 6.2 mile paddle this morning. Oh my gosh, Jen, this dolphin surfaced about 10 feet in front of the bow of my boat. It was magical. And then we saw this sea lion that was just hanging out on the jetty coming back. We saw, I'm losing my words. We saw a bird, a heron. We saw a heron, and then we did a little bit of skills practice afterwards. Brenda was able to film me doing one of the things that I do when I tip my boat sideways. I mean, it was beautiful. So I had good sleep. I had good nutrition this morning. I've been well connected with my people, had some great exercise, and Steve was home. If I had to handle this on my own, I think I would have gone into overwhelm. I can't do this. This is too much. How come I have to do it? I should be having help. I didn't have to shoulder any of that. You were flexible about recording. We got on the phone. Do you want to do it today? Do you want to do it tomorrow? So this was a really blessed, fortunate time. Now, last week, I had a really hard couple of days. And if this would have happened last week, this would have just gutted me. And that's okay. My intention in sharing this with you, the listener, is if you've just had something happen, if you have things that happen and you lose it and you can't deal, it's okay. That happens to everybody. And I think we think that we're supposed to navigate through bumps and hiccups and unexpected things with ease. That is just like sometimes today was a blessed day. it would have happened last week, it would not have been the same story. So, what is it that you tell yourself when you struggle and things don't go as you planned, or you have a big reaction, or you get frustrated or overwhelmed or angry or irritable? Can you let that be okay? And Jen, you and I have been talking the last couple days that we've had some mood things going on. And as much as Jen and I talk about self-compassion, I go into that like, why is this happening? Why am I irritable? Why don't I have more energy? Why can't that's just normal, and we really want to normalize it. So I'd like to let you speak for a little while, Jen.
Aw. I just want to say, like, how frustrating, especially the first part. I mean, kind of today, I get it. You've got these challenges that pop up in front of you, and you met them. And I'm so glad you were able to meet them with that ease and flexibility and serendipity that the plumber was right there next door and was able to
Mhm.
come over. Like, stuff like that, I think is pretty magical. I mean,
Mhm.
so are dolphins too, as if I wasn't jealous enough. But thank you.
Brenda is really good about picking stuff up on the ocean, and we saw something and we couldn't figure out what it was, and it was a bunch of latex balloons that were inflated, and those are really, really bad for the animals and the environment, and Brenda's really good, so we paddled over there, and I put them on the back of our boat, and then she carries we both have knives in case we get stuck in fishing line, and so we popped the balloons, and then we saw the dolphin, and I wondered, like, is this universal karma?
Yes, I'm gonna go with that, or the dolphin directly saying thank you to you.
Yeah. Anyways, I
That
interrupted you,
is
so please go ahead.
wonderful. Well, no, I just wanted to do a little bit of that, just receiving and reflecting on your story.
Mm.
And that first part of your story with all of the I have had good experiences with lows, but I understand that yours right now is terrible.
Mhm.
And having this guy say that thing, I would have lost it too, probably, depending on what mood I was in. And it just made me think about how busy we are, and our lives are too busy to really accommodate something like that. I mean, even like scheduling medical appointments and stuff like that, I'm finding a challenge, and just, I don't know, life is just too busy, too full.
Mhm.
I'd love to be able to take some life calming measures. And I like
Yeah.
what you said about, and what are those, right? I think, I mean, I don't know what they all would be, but I do think that making sure that you're pretty well slept, or you at least put it on the list, right, of
Mhm.
things that are basically non-negotiable if we want to function well. So what you were saying about like how well you had slept, that you had reached out and you were in community, right? You felt connected. You had been exercising, eating well, like just all of that self-care. And had it been the week before, it would have been a really different story.
Mhm.
And I think one of the mistakes that I make is when something happens and I'm having that reaction where I'm either more dysregulated or my self-care things. And this happens. Like, I love how you always say this. You always let your listeners know, like, it's okay. Whatever page you're on in your chapter, whatever chapter you're in your story, like, to really show yourself some grace, because I fall in and out of self-care all the time.
Mhm.
The point is to just, like, keep it, I don't know, tethered to you, like, keep it, like, intentional maybe, even as we fall off of it. And I guess in order to do that, we have to not freak out when we fall off of it,
Mhm.
right? I love Ayurveda. I love Ayurveda, the ancient Indian system of medicine, and this idea that we have these different doshas. And the very name dosha means, I think, I'm not an expert in this, but
Mhm.
I believe means to go out of balance.
Mm.
So that system had the wisdom that we would naturally go out of balance, and that was kind of just integral to our nature. And I think that humility, right? It's so humbling. But if you think about it, like, I'm surrounded by houseplants. I've got a bunch of little babies over here, and it's in the nature of the houseplant to like dry out. I have to water it, right? So that's like the same for us too. And I know that so I was going to say the mistake that I make is forgetting that I'm a verb
Mhm.
and making myself a noun. And what that usually looks like is when I'm having a rough time, that suddenly I've always had a rough time, that's who I am, that I judge myself harshly, like I just can't get it together. First of all, this idea that we should be together, like, that's what Ayurveda knew. They knew that we were constantly going to be falling out of balance, that life was constantly going to be coming at us. And I don't know, sometimes I think I guess this doesn't happen all that often to me, but I remember thinking, like, if you're going to have a car, you're going to get a flat tire sometimes, right? If you have a body, you're going to get exhausted regularly
Mhm.
and have to restore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the idea of just normalizing that it's okay to be out of balance. Like, that's what we should expect. And I think it just makes it so much easier. And that's not to say that we don't go into some judgment. But what I notice both you and I do, because we've had some things go on recently, is we name this feels like it's going to be permanent. This feels hard, but I know this isn't the truth. I know I'm having attachment injuries. I know that I'm having a conflict with somebody, but I know that they love me. I know that they care. It just feels really rotten right now. I know we'll do repair work. So I think our head wants to go into that extreme place of, like you said, it's always been this way. It's never going to change. This is hopeless. I can never count on people. People always let me down. Whatever that narrative is, that we all have our own wounded scripts of what they are. And when we go into that, if we can catch it and go like, this is a hard moment. It will pass. I'm having a hard time. I'm not as regulated as I am. I mean, last week I just felt like when I had those couple of days, I felt like I was poloing you a couple times a day. I even said something because I needed to communicate with you to kind of tether me down because I felt like every little thing just sent me off the rails. And it's such an uncomfortable feeling to not be able to kind of ground my own self. And for me, I think verbally processing and knowing that you would be receiving it, because there's no live response from you in the moment. But for me, that was really grounding.
Yeah. I was happy that you reached out and you did. You asked, it's that consent thing. Do you have the space? And then, of course, the story is I'm too much,
Oh,
right?
totally.
Often. And
Yeah.
then to be able to, I mean, we're not meant to do this alone.
Mhm.
We're really not. We're meant to be together and connected and interconnected. I was so glad that you reached out.
Well, it's interesting. I have the closed Facebook group Unapologetically Sensitive, and when people ask to join, I ask, "How do you identify if you're comfortable sharing where you're from, and how did you find out about the podcast?" And I can't tell you how many people say that their therapist has referred them. I'm always curious to know who the therapists are. So if you want to send me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com and tell me who you are and where you are, I appreciate it. I'm just curious.
Mm.
I don't ever ask people. But I was wondering, really, I was making up a story in my head, and here was a story in my head that I think people go to therapy thinking that they're going to get fixed. And as therapists, we can support people in their journey. We can help to normalize and validate. We can teach skills and tools. But being human is messy. And if you listen to the
You can't
podcast,
therapy.
yeah,
Can't therapy your way out of being human.
no. And I
Right.
was wondering if one of the things that therapists like when they refer people to listen to the podcast is because you and I are incredibly vulnerable and real about the struggles that we have and are very transparent. And I think that it just normalizes that this is what you get when you're a human being.
Yes. Yeah. Ugh. Well, I mean, you're gonna get me started
Go ahead.
on the whole like, ah. And the funny thing is that what I was gonna originally say was like about my therapist, the first one that I ever really, really loved. And the minute you said therapist, it came back into my mind, which I just thought was really cool. But I'm gonna put that on the shelf for a minute because, and you and I know we've talked about this on the podcast before. It's when we look at these structures about being an expert, right? It's so funny. I'm about to hire a couple of people and be a supervisor, and it's so exciting.
Hmm.
And I think I spoke about it last time. That also made me freak out. But I was asking questions about like what do they see as like would be a good supervisor and all this stuff. And someone wanted to call me an expert in I think it was mindfulness. And I've been a meditator since I was 18, so it has been a while, and I've taught it and everything. But I kind of laughed, and he loved it. He loved that I like totally would not embrace this expert idea. I'm still learning. And when your growth game is strong, like, yeah, there's so much, right? But anyway, what I wanted to talk about when you said that and why I think being vulnerable and talking about ourselves is so important is because I've had clients say to me like, "Well, you never get angry, do you?" Like this was before I was a little more comfortable with self-disclosing and can be done very responsibly as long as I've processed it and it's in the service
Hmm.
for my client and what they're going through. And it's a human problem. It's not my client specifically, their
Hmm.
problem. I think it's amazingly healing. And because we're meant to tell stories to each other, that's how we learn. We're meant to be in connection. And the power of, oh my gosh, you too, because there's this tendency to want to put us up on a pedestal. And I think our field has nourished that, as a lot of fields have. I think that is the patriarchy and white supremacy and everything, like I know and you don't.
Mhm.
It's an oppressive system. It's an oppressive, messed up system. So that was the soapbox that I was going to
Mm.
get on.
Mhm.
And I would love to talk more about it, but I'm also not going to talk more about it right now because I will get going and I won't stop. And then what I wanted to say earlier about that therapist that I loved so much, one of the first books she had recommended to me was a book called Trances People Live.
Mhm.
I don't remember the author. It's an old book at this point if I read it so many years ago, but it was really, really good. So we go back into our stories. We go back into our automatic programming. And what gets me really excited is that's enlightenment right there. When you can catch it, when you can wake up and have that transparency on your story and on your attachment injury and how it has shaped how you see the world in painful ways, that's it. That's coming out of the trance, that's waking up. And to me, it's really exciting. And
Mhm.
then to be able to turn towards ourselves with care and compassion. And there's a lot of humility in there, right? I think this idea of come fix me so I can be some great human, there's no humility to it. And
Mhm.
I think what the world needs definitely is more humility.
Yeah. Say a little bit more about that because I don't use humility in that way, so I'm curious. I wanna understand a little bit more about what you mean.
Okay, so humility. I think humility for me is, well, it's actually a lot of things, isn't it? In the sense that I was just using it, it's like we're human, right?
Mhm.
Human humility. To me, that is so funny. This is where I go off on like the white supremacy thing, which is here's the perfect, here's what everything is supposed to be like, which is the total myth. That's the lie. And anything that's not that is wrong or needs to be fixed. And so much comes under this umbrella, so much. So there's humility in, for instance, accepting our limitations. And I think that includes cozying up to our stories, right? Like we can't therapy our way out of being human, and it's how we hold our stories, how we embrace our stories. And absolutely there's skills. In order to have good boundaries, you have to be in touch with what your natural human limitations are without being ashamed of them, right? So shame's around when perfection is around. So I mean humility that way. Humility I think also shows up when I don't claim any sort of expert status in anything. That's
Mhm.
being humble, right? That's humility. I mean, it's relevant for understanding others. So I come to each client with humility. I don't want to participate in that. If you have you ever had anyone therapize you, like within like a half hour, they've got you all figured out and they're going to tell you exactly what's wrong with you and how to fix it.
Rolling my
Like,
eyes right now and then telling me and being so misattuned and sure that they know what's going on with me. I mean, if you go back and listen to the blindsided episodes, or a couple of them early on, that was totally it, and it felt terrible.
yuck,
Terrible.
right? So humility is something that I bring to my job, right? My
Mhm.
role. I bring it to my children. I don't inhabit this space of I know better. How can I possibly know what it's like to be a 13-year-old
Right.
male? Well, yeah, actually non-binary. I'm still getting used to that.
It takes
Right
time.
here, right now in this time.
Yeah.
So, humility there, I think, are hearing more and more in the field instead of this idea about having multicultural competency, which
Mhm.
sounds like what? Expertise, right? We have multicultural humility
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
starting point.
Thank you for sharing that. So it's interesting as you were talking, when we take in information, we have this is my explanation. We have filing cabinets in our head. And so we take in information and we figure out which filing cabinet it goes in and which file and which folder. And so as you were talking, I was thinking, how do I reconceptualize this? And the way that I talk about it is I think about things as being very binary. So I'm not an expert or I'm an expert. I'm proficient, I'm not proficient. I'm inept or I'm perfect, those extremes. And that my goal
Mm,
is to get people in that messy middle. And so what I call the messy middle is what you call humility of going like, I don't know, let's figure this out together because I try and stay out of each extreme. And I can tell you, I can't remember what the context was, but I was talking about something that when things get really hard and I go into shame, which is binary. So I'm either in shame, and when that gets too intolerable, then I flip into anger, anger at the other person for making me feel this way because the shame just becomes too unbearable until I can go to that messy middle of like, well, maybe there's some truth on both ends and what do we need to do? So that was helpful hearing you say that, and just I think everybody has a different way of conceptualizing things.
Yeah, that's part of the creativity and fun, I think, with clients, right? Is trying to, I mean, our human language is limited.
Yeah,
We're using it symbolically
yeah,
and it doesn't capture it all.
yeah. I think so much of the work that happens with my clients, and my guess is your clients too, I'd love to hear that when we talk about that appropriate use of self-disclosure, conscious use of self. So I had a client recently who was really struggling with some things and wanted tools so that they wouldn't be struggling with these things. And this may have been during that period. I bet you it was those couple days where I was really dysregulated. But I had enough self-awareness that I had my boundaries up and I wasn't needing help with what I was going through. I just knew that it was a really hard time. And I asked if it would be helpful if I shared a little bit about what was going on. And I talked about some of the things. Oh my gosh, this client just sighed with relief. And it was this thing of, I'm not alone. There's nothing wrong with me and I'm not alone. And I think so many of us have gotten messages from people that don't understand how we're wired, that we're too sensitive or we're too intense or we're too dramatic or we're too needy or too analytical, whatever it is, the two are the not enough. And we keep thinking that there's something wrong with us because we have these strong reactions. And sometimes we need to learn tools and sometimes there's wounding. If it's creating suffering for you, then obviously we want to help you feel a little bit more balanced. And so much of the work that I do with clients is about like, what if this was okay? And you've done that to me when I had this period of feeling like I was being too much and too needy. I don't remember the words, but I think I told you I had to pause your polo because I just sobbed. And it was okay to be where I was at. And you were just going to be here with me and you were supporting me and holding space for me. And I just like, I had this like, it's okay. It's okay to, just be in my head and feeling judged and feeling like I wasn't enough and that what I did wasn't okay. And
Yeah.
so I think so much of that healing, and we can do some of this work on our own, but doing it in relationship with others is really where I think the magic healing comes from. It's a combination. We need to be responsible for our healing, but to allow others in to do the healing with us, man, is that powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, Pamela Kraus, who I took my level 1 IFS training with, she would say we're both injured in relationship and we heal in relationship.
Mhm.
It's like the repetitive pattern of rewounding ourselves in relationship with ourselves, right? And then
Right.
learning how to heal ourselves is really, what we're doing, right? That individual. But we do it through connection with other people. Yeah, I remember that moment. Sometimes I find that so helpful. It's like, you were fearing being needy, right?
Mhm.
And then this, well, what if that was true? Like, what if you were needy and I love you so much, I'm here for you?
Mhm.
Kind of going into that, what does that mean, to be needy? Yeah, this is humility, right? We have needs, we're human. And there's
Yeah.
that perfectionism. I shouldn't have needs. And believe me, I got that one too. That one I think, it's funny when you're in this like place of like, maybe I'm healing from that. But healing's a process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what happens is volume goes down on it, that when we first start and we're wounded, the volume is loud and it feels like that's what the reality is, and over time, the volume goes down, so it's like, yes, it's there. What else is true? So, I don't know that those wounds ever totally go away. I think they wax and wane, but they don't run my life like they used to.
Yeah. Yeah. What you're calling volume, I usually call transparency. We can see that it's happening
Mhm.
instead of totally believing that it's true, which would be just to be like entirely in the trance, right?
Mm.
Versus
Mhm.
like watching the trance
Mhm.
or watching the story, the old story, and being able to hold it differently, right? Being able to relate to it differently.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll ask clients, like, if they're there, and like, how much transparency do you have? How much while you're in it do you know you're in it?
It's a great question. You know, it's interesting. This is an aside, but it's related. My brain remembers things by location. That when I worked home health and I'd get a new client, I would remember where they lived. And when you were talking, when you were reflecting what you said, I know physically where I was when you said it. And then we had
Huh.
another instant, and I remember physically where I am. It's just so interesting that my the way my brain is wired is very much to I can't remember what happened, but I know where I was, and it was something touching. Just
Oh,
interesting. I
I
think
love
our brains are
that.
fascinating. Yeah.
Hmm. I see. To me, I hear that and I'm like, there's a really cool art project in there.
What would that be?
I have
I'm
no
like, really?
idea. Yes. Oh gosh, the layers of experience, right? So we have this
Yeah.
like 360-degree, multi-layered things to draw upon, and you encode emotion and location.
Hmm.
I think that that's amazing. I can relate to that a little bit actually now that we're talking about it, but I've never thought of it this way. I remember going back and visiting like a childhood home
Hmm.
and going into a certain room. It was the room where I was with my grandma when she died.
Mm.
I was not expecting it. I didn't dial it up, but like I stepped foot in that room, I just started crying, And it was
Mm.
emotion. There was a lot to it. It wasn't just grief and sadness. This had been many years after. I wasn't even thinking about it because there was so much in the house to like look at and stuff.
Mhm.
So context, right? Context matters and location is part of our context. I find that with clients. It's funny, if I see a client in the grocery store, I won't really remember their whole
Mm.
story. But if a client comes in, or we're on Zoom now, because I did know this did translate to Zoom, or if they
Mhm.
came into my physical location office, and even if I hadn't seen them in years, they sat down in my chair and I looked at them, and I'd be like, how's your boss, like Terry, and like remember their name, and they're like, how do
Mhm.
you remember those
Yeah.
details?
Yeah.
But if someone asked me who is this, like I would have no hope of remembering. And if I see you in the grocery store, like I'm barely even going to remember what we talked about last session. Whereas if when I
Yeah.
sit down, it's like all there. I'm fascinated by how our brains work.
Yeah. Yeah. I just started reading Divergent Minds by Jenna Nuremberg. Have you read it?
No.
It's supposed to be great. She talks about ADHD, HSP, autism, how our brains work. There's some research stuff in it. I just started it last night. I just joined. In fact, I'll talk to you offline. There's a therapist book club, and they're just finishing up this book, and then there's another book. So I thought, kind of sounds like fun.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there is a pretty strong correlation between ADHD, being highly sensitive, and autism. And so I'm really curious. I've really been wanting to tease that out more and more. And I'm just kind of fascinated by it. And I think a lot of the preconceived ideas that we have about autism, of like not being social, not making eye contact, obvious stimming like ham flapping. Autism looks so different in women, and women and our special interests can be relationships. Like in the introduction, she talks about, there are a handful of things that she loves talking about, and anything outside of that, not so much. And you and I did that episode on small talk, and it's the same thing for me, that pick one of the things I'm interested in and let's take a deep dive. And if it's outside of that, I'm like, no interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just
Mm.
interesting to me. Yeah. We are needing to wrap up. Is there anything else that you want to say regarding what we've been talking about? I know we kind of strayed just a little bit, but it all circles back.
No, I think I'm complete for now. I always love being here with you. Thank you for having me.
I love being here with you too. Thanks for being here. Hey again. I'm curious to know, what did you think? Was that helpful? Are you able to have self-compassion sometimes? Are you able to have that awareness in the moment that this is hard, but this isn't the truth of it? Are there times when it's harder and you just get kind of pulled into that? This is terrible. It's never going to change. I feel hopeless. I feel like I can't do anything. We all go to all of those places. And my hope is that Jen and I talking about this really helps to provide a sense of comfort, and that, is it okay to be exactly where you're at? And if you need some tools, we can help you with the tools, but we really just want to normalize that struggling, being out of balance is okay. And sometimes we do it better than other times. Hopefully, in the larger picture, the struggles become shorter and less intense. If you're struggling a lot, if you're feeling pulled out of balance a lot, then you may want to work with somebody. But We just want to normalize that there is no perfect, blissful life where people manage things perfectly all the time. Like it just doesn't exist, at least not that either one of us know about. If you heard things and you want some support, you can reach out to Jen at heartfulnessconsulting.com. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. If you are a therapist that listens, or if you're a client that was referred by your therapist and you're comfortable sharing who your therapist is, I would love to know. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. I'd love to know where your therapist is located also, just because I'm curious. And if not, that's okay too. You do not have to share that information. I hope you are doing well. I hope you're enjoying the fall and the cooler weather. I think that's all I have to say. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.